Meet Isabella, a 42-year-old systems engineer living in Portland, Oregon. For the past 16 years, Isabella has quietly mastered a rare specialty in legacy automation systems used in the food production industry, a niche only a handful of professionals nationwide truly understand. With 2 degrees, one in applied systems engineering and another in food technology, she's been the invisible backbone behind a major regional food manufacturer's operations. Isabella's journey hasn't been glamorous. She's never been one to demand recognition or rock the boat. Raised in a humble family that valued hard work over words, she's always believed that results speak louder than praise. 2 years ago, a large Oregon-based food producer hired her to fix a critical packaging line malfunction remotely. Within 18 hours, she solved the problem, preventing the loss of a key client. Yet her salary remained stagnant at just above minimum wage, roughly $32 annually. The raise she received last week, a 4% bump, felt like a bitter joke rather than a reward. In a cramped, bland break room filled with the stale scent of reheated food and bitter coffee, Isabella stared at the email that broke her spirit, wondering if anyone truly saw her dedication. Isabella sat alone at the small, scratched table in the break room, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The sterile beige walls reflected the dullness she felt inside. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through the email one more time. 4% raise. 4%, on a salary that barely covered rent in Portland, let alone the expertise she brought to the table. For 16 years, Isabella had dedicated herself to mastering legacy automation systems, complex machines that kept food production lines running smoothly. These were systems younger techs avoided, deeming them outdated or too difficult to understand. But Isabella's deep knowledge made her invaluable, even if that value was invisible to those who controlled the budget. Her mind wandered back to 2 years ago, when the company had recruited her. Their packaging line was in chaos, a major client threatening to pull out after repeated malfunctions. The plant manager called her in desperation. Isabella worked remotely for nearly 18 hours straight, troubleshooting every circuit, every relay, every logic string. When the final fix took hold, production surged back online, and the client stayed loyal. No fanfare, no bonus, just a signed contract and a wage that barely added up to $32 a year. At the time, she'd told herself this was a foot in the door, a chance to prove herself and move up. But after 2 years, the pay remained stagnant. Now, this email felt like a slap in the face. A raise of $1.248 a year. Barely enough for a tank of gas. Later that afternoon, Isabella found herself standing outside her manager's office. The hallway was empty, the hum of machinery muted in the background. She knocked lightly, then stepped inside. "Mark," she began, her voice steady but soft. "I appreciate the raise, but after 16 years in this field, I have to be honest. It feels like I'm still making minimum wage. I'm dedicated, but it's hard not to feel undervalued." Mark didn't flinch. His eyes, once warm and encouraging, were cold and unreadable. "You should be grateful," he said bluntly. "Most people aren't getting anything. You've only been here 2 years. If you want market rates, go earn them somewhere else." Isabella's throat tightened. She wanted to list the countless times she'd saved client accounts, trained new hires, written SOPs still used across departments. But instead, she nodded quietly. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling fan's slow spin, replaying the conversation in her mind. Her husband, James, sensing her distress, whispered gently, "Don't let them steal your joy. Work like you're paid." The words were meant to comfort. But Isabella knew better. She wasn't being paid to care. Yet she did, every day. Without fail. The very next morning, something shifted. The usual hum of friendly chatter and laughter around the office was replaced by cold silences and sideways glances. It was as if her quiet challenge had shattered an unspoken rule. Isabella noticed her access to critical systems was revoked without explanation. When she asked a junior technician, Zoe, about it, Zoe shrugged. "They're testing access levels. Nothing personal." But everything felt personal. The lunch table where Isabella once sat was now filled, except for her seat. She ate alone in a small conference room, pretending to be busy with meetings. The camaraderie she'd built over years dissolved into stiff, formal check-ins with Mark, who now barely met her eyes. Her name slowly disappeared from emails and project notes. The very essence of her work, the invisible expertise she carried, was being erased brick by brick. Still, Isabella continued to perform, driven by habit, pride, and fear of becoming the bitter, resentful woman others expected. She double-checked reports, answered calls, stayed late to keep the line running. But no, thank you, ever came. Instead, whispers reached her ears. One young engineer muttered, "Guess even dinosaurs get raises now," as he passed her cubicle. She didn't respond. What was there to say? That she wasn't old, just experienced? That she'd mastered systems before most of them finished college? Desperate for support, Isabella anonymously posted her story on a Women in STEM forum. The responses were a mix, some kind and encouraging. But many echoed the same dismissiveness she faced daily. Be grateful for what you got, they said. Try healthcare, then you'll see real hardship. At home, James tried to comfort her. But even his advice to just do your job felt like another silence forced upon her. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was what that 4% raise said about how they saw her, as disposable. Invisible. The slow erosion of her spirit was terrifying. One morning, she forgot to set her alarm. Not because she was physically tired, but because she no longer cared if she was late. She was mourning more than a paycheck. She was grieving her dignity. Meetings she once led no longer invited her input. Juniors stopped asking for her advice. Her name vanished from reports she had painstakingly contributed to. A long-term client optimization project she owned was quietly reassigned. No explanation, no acknowledgement. And then the cruelest cut came in whispered office gossip. Passing the lunchroom, Isabella overheard two colleagues. She acts like she deserves more. 4% raise and still complaining. Laughter followed. Honestly, if she weren't so emotional, maybe she'd get somewhere, one said. Emotional. That word pierced her deeper than any insult. It was a label used to dismiss women who dared to speak up. Isabella froze outside the doorway, the words sinking into old wounds. Memories of being told she was too passionate. Passed over for promotion because she cared too much. And always swallowing her feelings to keep the peace. But this time, she didn't feel grateful. She felt betrayed. That night, over dinner, James watched her quietly. You're somewhere else, he said softly. I think I'm done trying. She admitted. James leaned in, voice gentle. Done trying what? To prove I belong. Silence fell like a thick velvet curtain. Fragile yet unyielding. The next day, Isabella stopped offering ideas. She didn't correct errors she saw. She left early without staying late to fix last-minute issues. And nothing happened. No one noticed. That confirmed what she feared. She'd become invisible before she even stopped trying. That weekend, Isabella opened her resume for the first time in 4 years. Dusty, outdated, like a forgotten version of herself. She updated certifications, refreshed formatting, and hesitated over salary expectations. Research showed she should be earning at least $65 given her skills and location. She was making just half. The weight of years underpaid settled heavy on her chest. She started applying, slowly at first. Then with fierce urgency, recruiters called. She spoke of growth, omitting the painful truth. She longed to be seen, respected. Offers came. $55,000, $58,000, $62,000. A small Denver-based food tech startup stood out. They invited her to interview the very next day. Closing her laptop, heart racing, Isabella felt something she hadn't in months. Hope. Quiet hope. The kind that whispers, "You're not done yet." Isabella's interview with True Harvest Labs, the Denver-based food tech startup, felt different from anything she'd experienced in years. The hiring manager, a sharp but warm woman named Grace, didn't just skim her resume. She asked about Isabella's process, her problem-solving style, how she navigated complex systems when they broke down. Grace listened, really listened, to every word, nodding thoughtfully. No judgment, no second-guessing, just respect. When the offer came, it was $72 annually, more than double her current wage, with flexible hours and a remote work option. Isabella hesitated, Not because of money but because of what she was leaving behind. Loyalty was a tricky thing. She'd invested so much in her old company. The memories of late nights and tough battles hard to let go. Still, deep down, she knew the company had already decided she was disposable. The day before her last official day, an unexpected shift rattled her old workplace. The plant's biggest client, Cascade Foods, a national distributor responsible for nearly 40% of their output, scheduled a surprise process audit. This was Isabella's domain. She'd written the integration manuals, built the quality control protocols, and owned the efficiency metrics. But she wasn't invited to any prep meetings. Instead, the responsibility was handed to Evan, a junior technician who once dismissed her as a dinosaur. Evan fumbled through outdated documentation pulled from a neglected shared drive. He struggled to explain critical parts of the system, unaware that the interface he planned to demo had a broken logic string Isabella had patched just a month earlier. Isabella watched from a distance in disbelief, the familiar pang of invisibility biting deeper than ever. She said nothing, didn't offer corrections or reminders. The absence of her voice and expertise was a silence louder than any protest. The audit was a disaster. She caught a glimpse of the Cascade lead auditor's face, blank, confused, and frustrated. 3 hours later, her phone buzzed with a message from Carla, a senior operations representative at Cascade who'd worked closely with Isabella during previous rollouts. "Hey, are you okay? We noticed you weren't part of today's demo. It didn't feel like your team without you." Isabella stared at the message, stunned, not because anyone noticed her absence, but because it had been so long since anyone truly cared. She replied simply, "Still here, but not really." Carla read it instantly but didn't reply. Sometimes, no response speaks volumes. The next morning, whispers rippled through the plant faster than the conveyor belts. Rumors of Cascade pushing back the next shipment schedule. Questions about operational continuity. A sharp pallor on Mark's face and an uncharacteristic urgency in leadership emails. Isabella sat quietly at her desk, watching the structure she'd painstakingly held together begin to fracture. Lines slowed, calls from frustrated clients increased. The glitches she'd fixed months ago re-emerged, halting production for hours. Yet she said nothing. She didn't need to scream or burn bridges. She only needed to walk away. Her resignation email had been simple and direct. Subject: Transition. Dear team, thank you for the opportunities and challenges over the past 2 years. I have accepted a new position that better aligns with my professional growth. My last day will be Friday. I've documented all outstanding processes in the shared folder. Best, Isabella. No farewell party, no fanfare, just the quiet closing of a laptop and a long exhale. Her departure was met with silence. The same silence that had shadowed her final months. But underneath that quiet, a storm was brewing. Over the following week, her inbox exploded. Messages flooded in. Need clarification on your notes. Do you remember where the X file is? Urgent client request. She didn't respond. She had already given more than enough. Meanwhile, the chaos inside the plant escalated. Shipments missed deadlines. Cascade's support tickets doubled. An automation glitch Isabella had flagged months prior shut down 3 production lines for nearly 11 hours. Leadership scrambled to patch the growing cracks. Overtime and bonuses were offered. Former contractors were hired temporarily. Then came a call from an unknown number. Isabella let it ring to voicemail. It was Mark's voice, brittle and desperate. "Isabella, we're hoping you might be open to consulting, just temporarily. We've had setbacks. You know the systems better than anyone. Of course, we'd compensate accordingly. Please call me back." Isabella listened twice, not out of interest, but disbelief. They'd called her ungrateful. They'd pushed her to the margins. And now, as their carefully constructed systems began to crumble, they wanted to buy their way back in. She didn't call him back. Instead, she forwarded the voicemail to James with a single line. "Funny how silence gets loud when things fall apart." At True Harvest Labs, the contrast was palpable. Just days after starting, Isabella presented a system redesign plan that earned unanimous approval from the team. Her new manager, Grace, shook her hand firmly. "We're lucky you chose us. Grace said simply. No politics. No minimization. Just respect. That evening, Isabella closed her laptop feeling a peace she hadn't known in years. 3 months later, she was invited to speak at the Regional Food Tech Summit on Legacy Systems and Leadership Blind Spots. She almost declined but felt a steady, calm strength urging her on. On the day, wearing a navy blazer with no name badge or title, just Isabella, she stepped onto the stage. From the audience, she spotted familiar faces, including Mark and 2 team leads, seated in the 3rd row. Eyes flicking nervously as she took the mic. She didn't look at them. She spoke of the dangers of undervaluing silent labor, of the invisible patches and fixes that keep systems running. She talked about loyalty as a double-edged sword and how some companies discard talent before realizing its worth. She never named names, but those in the room knew exactly who she meant. After the panel, startup founders, engineers, and even Carla from Cascade approached her, thanking her for voicing what many had lived silently. Isabella packed her things quietly, ignoring the glance from her former director hovering nearby. Closure, she'd learned, doesn't always come in conversations. Sometimes, it's a room full of people finally seeing you, and a man forced to live with what he missed. In the weeks following the summit, Isabella felt a profound shift within herself, one that went beyond the external changes in her career. The long silence, the years of feeling unseen, and the final act of walking away had cracked open something new, a clearer understanding of her own worth. And the toxic culture she had endured. For so long, she had believed that loyalty and hard work were enough to protect her. That dedication would guarantee respect, a seat at the table, and a fair reward, but the reality was far harsher. Her company had never truly valued her, they had only tolerated her presence because it was convenient. This painful realization was bitter but liberating. One quiet morning in her New Denver apartment, Isabella sat by the window sipping coffee, watching the city stir awake. She reflected on the years of silent labor she'd given to systems no one acknowledged. The countless nights spent troubleshooting, patching undocumented bugs, training others, and absorbing every frustration without complaint. She realized how much energy she had wasted trying to prove her worth to people who never intended to see it. Her mind drifted back to that infamous 4% raise. It wasn't just about the money. It was the message they sent, that 16 years of expertise and sacrifice were barely worth an extra $20 a week. That her care, her mastery, was cheap. She understood now that her pain wasn't an isolated incident but part of a broader pattern in industries like hers, where invisible labor, especially from women, is overlooked or dismissed. The words, emotional, and ungrateful, had been thrown at her as weapons, designed to silence voices like hers. She wasn't the problem. The problem was a culture that rewarded silence and punished authenticity. This shift in perspective sparked a new determination. Isabella was no longer willing to dim her light or shrink herself to fit into someone else's narrow expectations. She was beginning to see her value not through the eyes of others but on her own terms. Her new role at True Harvest Labs wasn't just a fresh start professionally, it was a rebirth personally. Here, her ideas were welcomed, her input valued, and her contributions recognized openly. The respect she received wasn't transactional but genuine. One afternoon, Grace, her manager, invited her into the office for a candid conversation. "You've been doing incredible work," Grace said warmly. "I want you to know that your voice matters here. If ever you feel undervalued or unheard, I want you to come to me." Isabella smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She realized how rare it was to have a leader who not only listened but actively fostered growth and respect. Back home, Isabella also noticed a change in herself. The quiet anxiety that had once accompanied every workday had faded. She found joy in solving problems again, no longer burdened by the fear of invisibility. James noticed it too. "You look lighter," he said one evening as they cooked dinner together. "I feel lighter," Isabella replied. "I'm finally taking up space." Her confidence grew not from external validation but from embracing her own story, its struggles, its setbacks, and its triumphs. She started mentoring young women in STEM. sharing not just technical knowledge but the lessons she'd learned about self-worth and resilience. She spoke honestly about the challenges of being undervalued and the importance of finding environments that recognize your contributions. Isabella also began speaking out publicly. Articles, podcasts, panels. She used every platform to highlight the hidden labor women perform and the need for systemic change. Her voice was no longer silenced by fear or resignation. It resonated with authenticity and strength. The subtle erasure she once endured became a rallying cry for recognition and respect, not just for herself but for others like her. At True Harvest Labs, Isabella's leadership on a new automation project further cemented her reputation. The team's success was a testament to her expertise and the power of a supportive workplace culture. One afternoon, as she reviewed project metrics, Isabella received an unexpected email from Carla at Cascade Foods. Isabella, I wanted to thank you again for your impact. The transition has been tough, but your contributions remain the foundation. Hope to collaborate again someday. Isabella smiled softly, the message a quiet affirmation of her lasting influence. She realized that leaving her old job wasn't just an exit, it was a transformation. The woman who once lay awake wondering if she mattered had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ready to claim her rightful place. Isabella no longer saw herself as a dinosaur, but as a pioneer, someone who had quietly kept systems alive and who now had the power to shape a better future for herself and others. And that made all the difference. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds of Isabella's home office, casting long, warm shadows across the room. The air felt different here, lighter, filled with possibility. True Harvest Labs, the small but rapidly growing food tech startup in Denver, wasn't just a new job, it was a chance at renewal. When Isabella first walked through the doors, she sensed something unique. Unlike her previous workplace, where silence often spoke louder than words, here conversations hummed with enthusiasm, and every idea was met with genuine curiosity. The respect she'd longed for wasn't just a promise, it was woven into the company's culture. Isabella's new role as lead systems architect came with responsibilities that reignited her passion. She was entrusted with redesigning critical automation systems, ones that had been limping along under outdated protocols. The project was daunting but exhilarating. She knew her expertise could transform these operations, improve efficiency, and prevent the kinds of crises she'd endured before. Her first few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late-night planning. But this time, the energy was different. When she spoke, people listened. When she suggested changes, they embraced them. The team wasn't just a collection of colleagues, they were collaborators, eager to learn and grow together. Grace, her manager, became more than just a supervisor. She was a mentor, an advocate who championed Isabella's ideas and ensured her voice was heard at every level. "We need you," Grace told her one afternoon after a successful presentation. "Your vision is exactly what this company needs to thrive." Isabella felt a surge of gratitude, but more importantly, a profound sense of belonging. She was no longer fighting to be seen or heard. Here, she was celebrated. Outside of work, Isabella's life also blossomed. The flexible hours allowed her to spend more time with James, rekindling the warmth and connection that had dimmed under stress. Weekends were filled with hikes in the nearby Rockies, quiet dinners, and conversations that flowed freely without the weight of unspoken frustrations. Yet, Isabella knew this opportunity was more than just professional success or personal happiness. It was a chance to redefine what work meant to her. She reflected on the years spent in her previous job, the silent labor, the invisible battles, the relentless effort to prove herself in a place that had already decided her value. Those experiences had shaped her but no longer defined her. At True Harvest, she was building something new, not just systems and processes, but a career aligned with her principles and worth. One morning, Isabella received an unexpected call from Carla, the senior operations representative at Cascade Foods. Their conversation was warm, a reminder of the bridges she hadn't burned despite everything. "We've been thinking about expanding our partnerships with innovative tech companies," Carla said. "True Harvest's approach is impressive. We'd love to explore how we might work together." Isabella felt a thrill. This was a door she never imagined would reopen. "Let's set up a meeting," she replied, feeling confident and poised. The collaboration discussions unfolded smoothly. True Harvest's flexible, forward-thinking solutions aligned perfectly with Cascade's needs. Isabella played a pivotal role, bridging technical expertise with strategic vision. Her ability to understand both legacy systems and cutting-edge innovations made her indispensable. As the partnership grew, Isabella's influence extended beyond True Harvest. She became a sought-after speaker and consultant in the food tech industry. Invited to share insights on legacy systems, leadership, and workplace culture, each engagement was a platform to advocate for respect and recognition, especially for women and underrepresented groups in STEM fields. One afternoon, after a keynote speech at a national conference, Isabella was approached by a young engineer named Maya. "Your story inspired me," Maya said, eyes shining. "I've faced similar challenges, and hearing you speak gives me hope." Isabella smiled warmly. "Thank you, Maya. Remember, your voice matters. Keep pushing, and don't settle for less than you deserve." That moment crystallized everything Isabella had come to believe, that her journey wasn't just about her. It was about opening paths for others. Back at True Harvest, Isabella spearheaded an initiative to create mentorship programs and inclusive policies, ensuring that the culture that had embraced her would continue to grow and support diverse talent. She understood deeply that opportunity wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was cultivated through intentional leadership and an environment that valued people for their full selves. Months passed, and Isabella's career soared. The projects she led flourished. The partnerships she nurtured expanded, and her voice echoed louder than ever. Yet she remained grounded, never forgetting the quiet woman who once felt invisible. Her journey had taught her that true opportunity isn't just about a new job or a higher salary. It's about finding a place where you can thrive, contribute authentically, and be seen for who you truly are. And in that truth, Isabella found her greatest strength. Isabella sat quietly at her desk in the softly lit conference room of True Harvest Labs, reviewing the latest system diagnostics with a calm focus she hadn't felt in years. The hum of the machines outside was a familiar, comforting rhythm, but more importantly, inside her chest, a new rhythm had taken hold, one of confidence, resilience, and self-worth. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It was the result of many small moments, each a step away from the woman who once felt invisible and undervalued, and toward a leader who understood her power and purpose. Reflecting on her journey, Isabella remembered the early days at her old job, how she'd buried her frustrations under a mask of quiet diligence, hoping that hard work alone would earn respect. Instead, she'd been met with dismissiveness, isolation, and a painful erasure of her contributions. But at True Harvest, things were different. Here, her expertise was not only recognized but celebrated. She had a voice in strategic meetings, a seat at the table where decisions were made. Her ideas sparked innovation and shaped the future of the company's food production systems. Yet, it wasn't just professional validation that fueled her growth, it was an internal shift. Isabella no longer measured her worth by others' approval or the silence of a hostile workplace. Instead, she embraced her own narrative, flaws and all, as the foundation of her strength. One pivotal moment came during a team brainstorming session. A challenging problem with an automation workflow threatened to delay production timelines. The room grew tense as suggestions fell flat, and frustration mounted. Isabella took a breath and spoke up, proposing a solution that leveraged an old patch she'd developed years ago but adapted with new technology. The room fell silent, then erupted in enthusiastic discussion. Her team rallied around her idea, quickly implementing it with remarkable success. Afterwards, Grace approached her, beaming. "That was brilliant, Isabella. Your blend of experience and fresh perspective is exactly what we need." That moment wasn't just a professional win, it was a declaration of her evolved confidence. She was no longer afraid to speak, to lead, to own her expertise. Outside of work, Isabella's growth rippled into her personal life. She found herself more present with James, more open to vulnerability and support. The couple rekindled their connection, sharing laughter and dreams in ways they hadn't for years. Isabella also prioritized self-care in new ways: mindful meditation, weekend hikes, and carving out time for creative pursuits. These practices nourished her spirit and reinforced her resilience. She also began volunteering to mentor young women entering STEM fields. Sharing her story, she became a beacon of hope and a source of practical advice. One mentee, Sophie, reminded Isabella of herself, bright, ambitious, but hesitant to assert her worth. During their sessions, Isabella encouraged Sophie to embrace her voice and set boundaries early. "You deserve respect from the start," she told her. "Don't wait to be seen. Make sure you're seen." Isabella's mentorship deepened her sense of purpose. She realized her journey was not just about personal success but about lifting others, dismantling the very barriers that had once held her back. True Harvest Labs recognized her leadership potential and invited her to join the company's Diversity and Inclusion Council. Here, Isabella championed policies to create equitable opportunities, fostering a culture where every employee's contribution was valued. Her efforts led to new mentorship programs, transparent promotion pathways, and regular forums where voices from all levels could be heard. Isabella understood the pain of invisibility too well to allow it to persist. Her leadership was both compassionate and fierce, advocating for systemic change with humility and determination. At home, she and James celebrated small victories, dinners with friends, weekend adventures, and quiet evenings spent planning future goals. She no longer felt the crushing weight of isolation or the sting of dismissal. Instead, she carried a quiet pride and the assurance that her worth was inherent, not earned through approval. The woman who had once felt like a dinosaur had grown into a trailblazer, paving the way for herself and others. Isabella knew challenges would come. Every career had them, but she faced the future with courage and clarity. Her growth was a testament to the power of resilience, self-belief, and the transformative impact of finding a place that truly sees you. The morning light poured gently into the conference hall where Isabella stood poised behind the podium. The room buzzed softly with anticipation, filled with industry leaders, engineers, and young professionals hungry for insight. Today, she wasn't just a speaker, she was a symbol of resilience, a voice for the invisible, and a testament to the power of perseverance. As Isabella began her talk on legacy systems and leadership blind spots, she felt a calm strength wash over her. Years of struggle, silence, and invisibility had forged her into someone who no longer needed permission to shine. She spoke candidly about the hidden labor that keeps complex systems running, the quiet fixes, the unrecognized expertise, and the emotional toll it takes when that labor is dismissed. Her words resonated deeply, filling the room with a palpable sense of recognition and empathy. "I was once invisible," she confessed, working tirelessly behind the scenes, only to be overlooked and undervalued. But invisibility does not equal insignificance. Our voices matter, our work matters, and it's time to be seen. Isabella looked out into the crowd and spotted faces that mirrored her journey, women and men who had fought quietly, whose talents had been dismissed or ignored. She challenged the industry to rethink how it values people, to break the culture of silence, and to build workplaces where respect is foundational. After her speech, a steady stream of attendees approached her. Startup founders, engineers, and even former clients shared their stories and gratitude. Carla, the operations representative from Cascade Foods, shook her hand warmly. "You gave voice to what so many of us felt but couldn't say. Thank you." Isabella smiled, feeling a deep connection. "Thank you for listening." Later, she noticed her former director seated a few rows back. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the past, and the growth that neither could deny. That evening, as she packed up, Isabella reflected on how far she'd come. The woman who once lay awake questioning her worth now stood tall, inspiring others to do the same. Her journey wasn't defined by setbacks but by the strength to rise above them. Isabella understood that true power lies not in silence or submission but in claiming your space, telling your story, and refusing to be invisible. She hoped her story would ignite change, not just in policies or systems but in hearts and minds. Because when one voice breaks the silence, it becomes a chorus that cannot be ignored. Isabella's story teaches us that true worth isn't measured by the recognition we receive or the paycheck we earn, but by the integrity and passion we bring to our work. The painful experience of invisibility and dismissal is sadly common, especially in industries where silent labor is undervalued and women's contributions are overlooked. Yet, it is precisely this quiet dedication that forms the foundation of success in any organization. Her journey reminds us that staying silent in the face of unfairness only prolongs the struggle. Speaking up, setting boundaries, and seeking environments that honor your value are acts of courage and self-respect. Sometimes, walking away is not failure but the strongest affirmation of your worth. If you find yourself in a situation like Isabella's, start by assessing your value objectively. Research your market worth, update your skills, and connect with supportive communities or mentors. Don't hesitate to advocate for yourself, request fair compensation, clarify expectations, and communicate your achievements. If your current environment remains toxic or dismissive, consider exploring new opportunities that align with your skills and values. Change can be daunting but often opens doors to growth and fulfillment. Above all, remember to prioritize your well-being. Practice self-care, seek support, and build resilience. Your worth is inherent, not dependent on others' recognition. By honoring yourself, you empower others to do the same, and together, you can reshape workplace cultures for the better. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.